food, because not all food is good for you. Some will heal you, some will kill you. And so we extract the essence, but not valuing the whole parts, the whole sum. And then exploitation is when we see reflected in food labor of, for low wages, we maximize profit on the backs of, in my case, and the historical impacts that has played into what we now call for culinary reparations, and understanding the culinary currency that women have played for so long in providing others, but at the same time, how has it been reflected in regaining that? When we think about the area of care economy, those who take care of children and cost of being a housewife that is not always valued, that goes into that dynamic of like, yes, you may go to a job and get a paycheck, but there are those who are putting in labor, keeping the society built up every day, and they may be under or unemployed. And food has been one sector. We've seen that repeatedly globally and locally being those three elements of colonization that need to be acknowledged and addressed, and policies to shift, and a mindset and a public will in these conversations to awaken people to this, but also at the same time, when you become aware, what do you do with that? How do you vote with your fork? How do you build community? How do you change policy? How do you start where you are at the local level, having those who are your political representatives speak on your behalf by informing them of these issues that they should know that their voters care about. And so they are your representatives, not the other way around. So make them accountable, but by you being aware. And, this is where the role of universities and research labs, collecting data, turning that data into policy and tracking that policy. And so that's where I am now with our DC Food Policy Council, of just understanding that we have to change the environment that people are operating in around food, because even if you have a sense of agency and you want to control what's on your plate, as I started off with the game of food, you're only really selecting from the choices that have been created for you. And entrepreneurship is another tool in the toolbox of people finding solutions and making those products and services available in the environment to begin moving the needle a little bit by showing the consumer demand and interest.
I think it was so interesting when you mentioned the culinary reparations. I've never thought of it that way, because I think we talk about reparations in a lot of ways, because like reparations is just like, the case of reparations is just so grand. But you kind of talked about like this entrepreneurship, which like you, first of all, like, let's just get some claps, like audio claps, like amazing entrepreneurship that you're doing for yourself and like your communities. But I'm wondering, like, if say like I create a community garden or a community space like that's I feel like part of that extension of this lifestyle of like where I'm incorporating food. But do you see like in the food industrial complex, like how do you see disparities in that? Like how do we reach that point where our own entrepreneurship can kind of fill those gaps of the disparities?
Definitely. And that's the, definition of entrepreneurship. You seeing a problem and creating a solution that's sustainable. And in this case with social entrepreneurship, one that has the triple bottom line in mind: people, planet, and profit. Because the typical profit-making model has been, bait, colonization inside of it. It extracts, it erases, it exploits, and we want to move away from that. And so that's the first thing. Everyone should just have an entrepreneurial mindset. When you see a problem, don't just complain, find a solution, work through, channel your ancestors, whatever strength you need to lean on, whether it's historical, the tribe that reflects your vibe around you. That's the starting point, and have the conversation internally, externally, and to begin putting yourself in entrepreneurial environments where you're with other people who are positive, productive, and motivated to create change within the sectors that they see that need to have that innovation at a time that we are done with the status quo. That's the short end of it on that one.
That is it. And like one thing I kind of wanted to wrap this up, but like everything that you do, like you interact with so many people, and like I feel like you just tell such a good story with like the way that you connect how food is a lifestyle for yourself, but you include people in that. And I was just wondering if you could share with like our KS fam, like how can, like, tell us a story maybe of like a time where you engaged with like a community that maybe like really embodied this idea of taking on what our ancestors have given us and claiming that. Like,
well, I mean, one great example as we come to a close is, the work with the WANDA Academy we launched this summer with the support of Sibley Memorial Hospital and DC Healthcare Finance Agency. It was an opportunity to work within my own community of Ward 8 here in Washington, D.C., and be able to have everyday women to become food heroes and to equip them with, one, a sense of sisterhood that's safe and supportive, and then also helping to address the isolation that COVID and the social distancing guidelines that we're following here have impacted us. And then thinking through from a healthy food access, how to connect these women with their African diasporan crops by connecting to other WANDA women who are growing them, who have stores. And that's how we begin reimagining our world through this lens of how can our Black women and girls become the food heroes that our communities need. And by doing so, we now have one of the women who is going to be leading a yoga session coming up for the women internally. And so it's about shifting the mindset that we're all leaders in our own right, at the grassroots to the grass tops. And we start by the small changes within ourselves, within our families. So I would say Leah is a great example who's doing the yoga session. She, 20-something DC native who has followed our work, volunteered for us, and she joined the academy, and she didn't have public transportation. We helped to support any woman where they are and give them a ride to the farm, or those who couldn't come to the farm, that there were a number of those. We dropped produce picked from the farm by the women. And this is how we built the social capital and the community that we sometimes talk about. Do we support one another? Like, yes, we can. Yes, we do. Yes, we will. And it's about having that intentionality, and that energy will attract the very thing that you so desire.
I want to end on that beautiful note. But I appreciate you, Tambra, for being with us. I appreciate you speaking about this and like this really like holistic aspect of our relationship with food and decolonizing from the systems that have tried to colonize us. So thank you so much. And I appreciate you spending time with us today.
Thank you so much. And for those who want to, follow and connect, our website is iamwanda.org. We're on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at iamwanda.org. And I'm at Tambra Raye. So thank you again for having me.
Thanks.
Kind of sort of activated. Where do we go from here?
This edition of Kinda Sorta Activated plays into two major ways, but intersects at this main focal point. How do we decolonize? For the systems, we have to upend the food industrial complex. Farm-to-table enterprise that encourages farmers and community members to work together to have fresh and quality access to food is important. In West Virginia, they did this by granting $800,000 to a major social research institute to create the infrastructure and systems to do this. This idea is sustainable and works with what is already available. There's no reinventing the wheel in this process. There's no reinventing when it comes to food. It's simply making sure that everyone is in the car and moving forward since we already got the wheel. It's an odd analogy, but it's real for this case. Dreaming Out Loud is another organization working specifically in the food systems in DC to upend the food industrial complex and impact students' access to food. They foster entrepreneurship within communities, speaking to Tambra's work as well, but to not only dream, but to create the communities that the community members want to live in. And the second aspect, and I find really personal, is decolonizing our minds. Food is truly ours. Food is yours. The larger system at play attempts to define you by the nature of the food system that they've devised. Like Tambra said, decolonizing our minds is a lifestyle, and I want us to encourage this process as we continue on in our lives post listening to this episode. Thank you, KS fam, for listening through of this second mini episode of the season, Decolonizing Diet. I'd like to thank Tambra for coming on this podcast, and I hope y'all enjoyed. Please follow us on our social medias at Kinda Sorta Brown on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And again, we have episodes every other week with our next episode on the election. I hope y'all are staying well and sane during this time, but I'm gonna leave it what I always do. Claim it. Bye, y'all.